Hi, Claire Wasserman here, founder and author of Ladies Get Paid, and welcome to a different kind of podcast episode. It is a recording of a live event that I did with Amina Altai, who is a holistic executive coach, leadership trainer, and author of a new book, The Ambition Trap: How to Stop Chasing and Start Living. In this intimate conversation, we dove deep into redefining ambition in a way that honors our well being instead of sacrificing it. Amina talks about developing two autoimmune diseases from overworking and her stop moment that changed everything. We'll explore the core wounds that drive painful ambition, how to identify your zone of genius, and practical strategies for workplace contentment. So, whether you're feeling burnt out or questioning your career path or simply wondering if success without self sacrifice is possible, this conversation offers both wisdom and actionable insights to help you shift from pushing to unfolding, from discipline to what Amina calls devotion. So settle in as we explore a new vision of ambition that aligns with who you truly are and want to be. Let's dive in. Hey, welcome everyone. So excited to see you here. Claire Wasserman, founder and author of Ladies Get Paid. Yay, I help women build better work lives. I'm always workshopping my one-liner, depends who I'm talking to. But a huge turning point for me and my business and my mission of my business came over the last few years because of the pandemic. And it was all about making ambition easier. And so when I saw my friend Amina come out with, or she's about to come out with this book called The Ambition Trap, oh my gosh, I got full body chills. I was like, I'm so glad I don't have to write that book because you did. And it is something we are all desperately trying to figure out, which is, I think, this central question: success without self-sacrifice. Is it possible? Is it possible? And this is a live event. It's also being recorded for the Ladies Get Paid podcast. But the cool thing about the live event is the chat. So I'm going to be just calling my double monitors here if I can ever figure it out, what I'm seeing in the chat, because it's going to help inform our conversation. For example, Lacey says, I'm trying to find the balance between being an ambitious high achiever and avoiding burnout. You are in the right place. So Amina, I'm going to have you introduce yourself because, well, you know yourself best. One thing though about you is that you are but one that you wrote in your bio to me was a leading holistic business career coach and author. And so part of when you introduce yourself, maybe talk to us a little bit about what does it mean to be holistic when coaching business and career guidance?
Yeah, I love this. I love this question. So I'm Amina Altai. I'm a holistic executive coach and leadership trainer. And I use the word holistic because what I realized early on in my career, and as I started to come to coaching, is that obviously we're not cut off between the head and the body. We are one unit. And so much of the work, especially when I started coaching almost 10 years ago, was just very much about the head and really dismissing the wisdom of the body and really not taking an integrated approach. And I just knew from my own experience that we really had to take an integrated approach. And so that's what I do. We focus on our career and business strategy and tactics, our mindset, our nervous system, wellness and self-care, all of it, because how can we have a healthy relationship to work if we're not applying the same diligence to all of those areas?
Yeah,
And so,
I feel the same way.
yeah,
And I add money into that too.
yes, exactly. Money is a huge piece of that, right? Especially like when it comes to self-care and having our needs met, we need to be able to have the money to do all of that. And so I have been doing this for the last 10 years. Before this, I worked in marketing and brand management, and I've had my own practice for 9 years and I was a founding guide for Chief, the Women's Leadership Network, and helped design a lot of their curriculum. And I have a book coming out on May 13th. It's called The Ambition Trap: How to Stop Chasing and Start Living. And that has been a very big piece of my life for the last couple of years.
Yeah, it is your personal story. Listen, this is the beginning of your book tour, and you are going to not get sick of telling your story, but tell us your story. What was the aha moment, not to the book necessarily, but I guess the movement behind the book of
Yeah.
this is not working for me. However you were, what was the breaking point to make you go, I have to think and act differently when it comes to my career and how I see ambition?
Yes, absolutely. Claire, you've heard my origin story, but I started my career in marketing and brand management, and I'm a child of immigrants. I am an elder child, and I really learned the idea that you have to work hard, especially as a person of color. You have to be the first one in, the last one out. And I worked so hard that I developed two autoimmune diseases. And it happened in this very dramatic fashion when I was in my mid to late 20s. I had gotten really sick and I'd been to 7 different doctors. And then finally on a Friday, I got a call from my doctor number 7. And she says, if you don't go to the hospital now, instead of going to work, you will be days away from multiple organ failure. And so that was, I call it my stop moment. I had to stop doing what I was doing because clearly it wasn't working and I had to choose another way. And that year, I jokingly call it my eat, pray, love year. I was still working, but I went back to school to study coaching, mindfulness, nutrition, somatics, just to feel better. And when I did, I was like, whoa, this is so cool. Work doesn't have to feel painful. I need to teach this. And almost a decade ago now, I sat down to design my own curriculum, which really does take that holistic approach, but it was born of my own pain.
Yeah.
And so for the last 10 years, I've been studying my ambition, but also my client's ambition. And
Mhm.
something really, you said the pandemic changed your business. The pandemic actually cemented this framework because a very interesting thing happened at the height of the social justice uprisings in 2020. I ended up coaching a handful of these celebrity girl bosses who were canceled. Now, my book is not an analysis of cancel culture, but what I started to see was like my own relationship to ambition, where my ambition cost me my health. I was hurting myself to get ahead. I was seeing these other women also experience hurt as a result of their ambition. And so it really cemented the framework that is in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. And now all things continue. Like the social change, progress is not linear, and this book is needed even more than ever. For somebody who's in a position where they're like you, maybe it's not quite dramatic, but maybe it is. What are some short-term things that they can do to at least just take a beat? Maybe they can't stop the external chaos, but internally, knowing that there's going to be a lot of unraveling, a lot of deeper work, a lot more ongoing work, but just for that like short term, I got to stop the burnout in its tracks if possible. Any tips on that?
Yeah, I love this question. And it's so wild because the more stages I'm on, the more podcasts I'm on, the more I tell my story, the more people are like, I had a near death experience. And I'm like, why is this happening to so many of us? So for a lot of us, it is really loud. But if it is not loud, that is wonderful. There's ways that we can get ahead of it. And I think sometimes our impulse is to be like, let me change jobs right away. And sometimes that's the right thing. And sometimes it's not, because everywhere we go, there we are, right? If I had left my first business and not changed anything about myself and gone somewhere else, guess what? I probably would have been in organ failure over there because I hadn't changed myself on the inside. And so I think just starting to examine our why is one of the, I think, quickest places to get insights. Right? First of all, awareness is 80%. So then if you're asking yourself, why am I driven to work this way? Why is my ambition costing me my well-being?
Yeah.
There's probably a core wound there, right? Which I talk about in the book. There's probably a feeling of not enoughness, and we feel like we have to prove ourselves. And again, that awareness can be 80%. And then moment to moment, just choosing something different. I'm choosing to leave at 5 o'clock and not check my email in the evening. I'm choosing to not let this interpersonal dynamic steal my peace. I'm choosing to stay regulated even inside of a hard environment.
Yeah. One thing I want to add on to that for a quick second for everybody, because I've seen this in my own life and also in clients that I coach, is you start to make different choices. So let's say the first choice is slowing everything down so you can become more aware in the moment. Then in that awareness, you might find you have guilt, right? Or like you close your laptop at 5, as you said, and then you feel bad about it. And then you beat yourself up over it. So if there's anything you want to add, go for it. But B, I would just encourage everyone, just because you're struggling doesn't mean you're not making progress. In fact, actually might be an indicator that you're making progress.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, exactly. Welcome all the voices, right? I think we have a tendency to make them wrong, right? So if I feel guilt, if I feel shame, if I feel sadness, welcome all of the voices, all of the emotions, because they are feedback, right? It's telling you something. It's telling you, maybe I feel like I don't deserve to clock out at 5 o'clock. Okay, what's underneath that? So welcome all of those emotions. Just be, all feelings are valid, but they're not all fact. So welcome them in and ask yourself, which feelings are fact-based and which are more stories? And if they're stories, how can I really reframe these?
Getting to the core wound, of course, this stuff is like deep therapy. So I don't know if your joke will be like mine, but I always say, hey, get the Ladies Get Paid book, but also get a therapist. But like for those of us who are doing this work on top of with therapy, and you say, all right, I have a not enoughness. I see where this came from. This is where sometimes I really do get the cliche of ignorance is bliss, because all of a sudden when you become incredibly insightful to all of your issues, it feels even heavier. So
Yes.
then what do you do? How do you sit with that?
Yeah. I think that's a bigger existential question, right? Of sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, it'd be so nice to not have chosen this path of awakeness in this lifetime. And also, I know that's what my soul chose because my soul was like, we've done the other things. We're ready for this level. And there's something for you to teach here. And for me, there's some peace in that of like, I know that I'm ready for this, even if it's uncomfortable. It's meant to be uncomfortable. Uncomfortable doesn't always mean a problem. And I think sometimes we make uncomfortable mean it's a problem. So first of all, I invite you into that. Just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's a problem. And second of all, I do believe on some level our souls chose this. We were ready to be awake. And
Mm.
so we're ready. Let's do it.
I love it. Talk to me about the difference between purposeful and painful ambition. And also, maybe if you even want to define ambition or your understanding of what ambition is, I think that'd be a great place to begin.
Yes. And I just want to say on the last point too, of, you know how wolf packs, obviously they walk in a pack. And there's a wolf that leads the front of the pack. And that wolf, because they're moving through brushes and all types of terrain, they'll get scratches on their fur, in their bodies or whatever. They're taking the hits for the rest of the pack. But they are the wolf that is ready to lead the pack. So it doesn't mean that the scratch doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean that the wound doesn't hurt, but it means that you're ready to lead. And so I share that with you all because I think those of us that are part of this conversation, we're ready to lead the pack. And sometimes that's uncomfortable. We take the hit, but you are equipped to.
Mhm. That's beautiful.
Okay, ambition. What does it mean? So, part of the reason that I wrote this book is that I felt like we had to redefine ambition because ambition is one of those culturally complex, politically loaded words that either highlights our benefits or our quote unquote drawbacks, depending on who's being labeled. So as soon as I started to look at the research, I saw ambitious men are seen as driven and powerful. Ambitious women are seen as aggressive and too much. And then you add in other intersectionalities if you're queer or disabled or an immigrant or a person of color, and then you get dinged extra for your ambition. So one of the first things that I set out to do was redefine it, right? I think ambition in its purest form is simply a desire to unfold. It's just a desire for more life. It's so natural, right? Every
Mhm.
living thing on the planet has a desire for more life. Grass has a desire for more life, right? But humans are the only ones that have the ability in how to direct that desire. But it's neutral and natural and it's for everyone. And that's the big reclamation we have to make together because the world has said ambition is cishet white men, right? But actually that's not the case. So we need to take it back together. And I think that's a really big piece of it. But painful ambition, and this is how I lived, and this is how a lot of my clients lived, is when our ambition is coming from a core wound. So there's
Mhm.
5 core wounds: rejection, abandonment, humiliation, betrayal, and injustice. And they happen in childhood, right? We could have the most amazing parents on the planet, like Claire, right? But you're going to emerge with a core wound because it's a very human rite of passage. But then what happens is if we don't reconcile the core wounds, we live from them, right? And then if our ambition's coming from that place, it's scorched the earth energy versus something that feels a lot more compassionate and harmonious. So purposeful ambition is coming from our place of purpose, from a place of truth versus the wound.
Mhm. In order for somebody to identify, the answer is read the book already, but in order to identify how your ambition is manifesting, like which core wound you are, what signals are we looking for?
Yes, great question. So I'm going to read you the wounds and I'll tell you for each wound, we have a corresponding mask. So the rejection wound, this is when we felt dismissed or not accepted as a child. This is one of my wounds. The mask that we wear is withdrawal or avoidance. So if you notice you have a tendency to avoid things, whether in interpersonal relationships or at work, there might be a rejection wound. Because if we stay away from people, we don't have to worry about being rejected again.
By the way, does that include oneself, like avoiding your own feelings, like
Yeah,
numbing and stuff? Yeah. Okay.
yeah, that's a great question. Abandonment is the next one. So feeling discarded or being neglected as a child. Then the mask is dependence, right? So that can look like anxious attachment, being overly dependent on others to have our needs met. Humiliation. This is when we felt like our caregivers were ashamed of us in some way. And the mask that we wear is martyrdom. So the overworking, the taking a hit for everybody. This is largely the person that I coach. This is also me. Betrayal. So this is where we felt like our caregivers disappointed us. They didn't live up to what we thought a caregiver should be. This is one of my wounds. So the mask we wear is control, right? Because if I just control the crap out of everything, I never have to be let down again. This is another one that shows up a lot in my practice. And then injustice. So if we felt our individuality was restrained in childhood, like our parents were ashamed of our like larger than life personality or what have you, then the mask that we wear is rigidity, like black and white thinking, needing to live in a perfect world and an intolerance for things that are imperfect. We can find our way in through the wound or the mask. Oftentimes the mask resonates more, right? So like people are like, oh, ding, ding, control or ding, martyrdom. And so we can have 1, 2, 3, or all 5 of these.
And then this might be an obvious question or an obvious answer, but how does that then lead to the ambition piece?
Yeah. So I'll give you a perfect example from my own life, right?
Yeah.
One of my wounds is betrayal, right? So the idea that your caregivers didn't live up to expectations, so then you control everything. Control was my lifeboat. I was like, you know what? I don't need to have a team because I can do everything. Because if I trust in the team, they're just going to let me down, just like my caregivers, even though I didn't know that was my true story. So I think that's part of how I actually burned out and developed 2 autoimmune diseases. I was working so hard and so long because I didn't make space for any kind of support because I felt I had to control everything. And that is so many of the women I coach. They even have like huge teams and staff, and they just don't trust them enough. So they're controlling everything, and then they're burned out and bedraggled and all the things.
I'm always going to get, it's guys, just so you know, we're going from like concepts, like abstract concept to like actionable tips. And it's always fascinating to go in and out from that. So taking these big concepts, what might be a first step somebody could do to just experiment with a different way of, you start with a different way of thinking so that you can then have a different way of behaving. And if you want to keep using the same example, that's fine, or spread it among the different wounds.
Yeah, I actually had a coaching session today with a client that was exactly on this. So they were talking about how they were avoiding their assistant. And I was like, why do you think you're avoiding your assistant? And they were like, I gave them this one assignment and they made this one mistake. And I was like, okay, cool. Let's look at the core wounds and the masks. And we started to talk about control. And she was like, oh my God, I feel so seen in this. She was like, I literally am controlling everything that I have no business to control. And I'm so tired because I'm so afraid to get close to this person and that they're going to let me down. So I've just been avoiding them. And so we just sat there and made a list of everything that was falling outside of their zone of genius and was taking them out of their flow state. And we went one by one and we're like, do you think your assistant can take this on? Can they take this on? And everyone was a yes, right? And so I was like, okay, where's the discomfort? Where's the friction here? The discomfort is in me trusting them. How do you trust them? One action at a time, one rep at a time, just like the gym.
Okay. By the way, zone of genius and flow state, for our non-Gay Hendricks familiar folks, tell us what those are and how do we find them in ourselves?
Love this. You're such a beautiful interviewer. So Gay Hendricks, who is like the forefather of self-help and just an amazing.
And a blurb for you. This is guys, seriously, like as a fellow coach here, nerding out, Gay Hendricks is the man. Amina is the woman, but he's the man and he gave the quote. So we like this guy.
Yeah.
Yay.
We love it. He's honestly, I had him on my podcast and you know, they say, don't meet your idols.
Yeah.
But he was just such an incredible human. I was sitting with him and I was like, God is present. I don't know how else to describe this. This is an incredible moment. But anyway, so he coined the term zone of genius. And our zone of genius, we all have one. Here's the rub. We all have one. It is the space where we are off the charts brilliant, where our gifts are innate and we do not have to push or force or effort to allow them to come through. But most of us work outside of our zone of genius, and that's what makes work feel so full of friction. And a lot of us feel like we don't have permission to work in our zone of genius. And so much of this is reclaiming that. And then flow state happens oftentimes when we're working inside of our zone of genius. It's a nervous system response too, where things are just easeful. We don't feel friction because we're flowing with the nature of our true gifts versus fighting who we really are.
And what's a way somebody could start to tap in if they're feeling like they're not getting that out of work right now? How can they get more familiar with what their zone of genius might be?
Yes. Okay. Buy the book or buy Gay Hendricks' book, Big Leap, because he has beautiful exercises on it. But even just starting to take inventory of your week and thinking about, where am I off the charts genius? Where are things really easy for me that what I contribute far outpaces what other people can? And just start to notice that and start to notice how much time you're spending there in your week. What you'll probably see at first is that you're not spending a lot of time there if you haven't consciously tried to. And what Gay says, and I love this, is start by just spending an extra 10 minutes there every day, because it's really tricky to go from 0 to 100, but we all probably could find 10 minutes. And so see if you can identify those gifts and spend 10 minutes there.
Yeah. And if the word genius intimidates people, because I think it does, especially for women, like, I don't know how great I am. Make it less about what you're great at and more about what makes you feel great.
I love that.
Yeah, that I just came up with that. So
it's gorgeous.
That's being recorded. Okay. All right.
One thing on that point, if you don't mind, women and historically excluded people, we tend to reject our genius because for centuries we've been told that genius looks a particular way, that it is male. Literally, when I was researching the book, I traced this all the way back to ancient Rome, that genius is a male trait. And when you look at history, it's always a hero and never a heroine, right? And so many of us reject that label because we're like, oh, it looks like that person over there, or it's this objective numerical variable. Is not. It can look any way. It could be engineering. It can be power skills like empathy. It can be
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you said power skills and not soft skills, because that also is diminutive or could be seen that way. All right. So let's think about, all right, so we've got some in the moment tactics. We have the beginnings of understanding how to unravel ourselves to the core. But I love that you have this, what's called a 1 year life upgrade framework. Okay. So this is projecting into the future, right? So I'm assuming you would say, doesn't matter where you are, what you're dealing with. Okay. Anyone can do this. What is it? And how do we start?
Yeah. First and foremost, we want to identify our zones of genius. So where are those places that we are off the charts, genius and amazing? Because we want to be spending more heartbeats there, because work unfolds so much more beautifully. There's a lot more contentment when we're in our zone of genius. So first and foremost, we want to spend some time there. The second thing is giving yourself permission to write the dream. So many of us don't feel like we can. The dream is like that whisper that's on our heart that we've like barely said to our best friend because we're like, who am I to have this dream? So if you feel called, I do want you to spend some time after this conversation to write down what the dream is for your life 1 year from now. And
By the way, if you have any examples, because I'm already thinking right now, and I'll illustrate. I always love talking about myself. So I'll talk about how I've denied some things about myself that I was too scared to say out loud that I really wanted.
yeah,
But I'm really curious what for you, writing the book, clients, as best as you can illustrate, it always brings all the advice to life.
I love that. Can we hear yours? And I'm happy to jump.
Yeah, something that like I'm writing a memoir right now about the first year of motherhood, parenting, really myself through my son's health crisis. And it's three kind of voices. And one voice is what happened to him. The next voice is my core wound or a huge issue, which is control, like understanding and grappling with control. And then a third voice, which is my like higher self, the experience of telling the story. And so it's very experimental. And I really denied, this is why I think I jumped on the word genius. I was denying the weirdness of it because I didn't feel like, I guess I was, I don't know, smart enough to do it, or it was like, you know what? Because it's putting myself out there, right? It's taking a risk. It's saying I'm playing with form. It's not like it's totally original, by the way. Other people have done this, to be clear, but it's hard. I'm writing something that's difficult and I'm saying, I think I can do it and I can tell my story and I have something to say. I'm going to say it in a weird way and people are going to listen. Boy, that's ambitious. And it's been a year now of mothering and thinking about this. And I only recently said out loud how frightened I was.
Mhm.
Like I was not really embracing like all of the procrastination. I didn't finally say, I think it's fear-based, which procrastination usually is. But yeah, it's hugely ambitious. And also there's a burden to that ambition. So I'd love to go into that in just a bit, not to turn this into my own not private because you're all here, but coaching session for me. But yeah, it's sometimes the ambition of the scale of this project is so big that it's so exciting and it's also so much pressure. And I don't think it's purposeful versus painful. I think there's not either or here on this one. It's both. So I don't know if I'm going in a different direction here. If you want to counsel me for a quick second of big ambition, embracing it, and also releasing some of the pressure of the bigness.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yes, exactly. And that you brought up a great point that whatever we're in doesn't have to be either or. It doesn't have to be entirely purposeful or entirely painful. Sometimes we're bouncing between the two. It's not an all or nothing proposition. But what I hear inside of what you're saying is expectations, because first of all, this is an incredible project. I think it's super interesting. I have never read a book from 3 perspectives. So to me, it's new and novel. And I do think you're hella smart. So it feels like you're the person to do this. I'm like, this sounds amazing. But it sounds like you're putting a lot of expectations on yourself for what it needs to do in the world. And sometimes expectations can be wonderful and sometimes they can sabotage us. So what are those expectations that you have for yourself?
Yeah, this is, by the way, I love live coaching because it really brings to life what the frameworks actually are and how to leverage or how to use them. I'll tell you what my expectations are, and then I'll also tell you why they're so fucking scary to let go of. The expectation is that this will be on the New York Times bestseller list, okay? Which of course is something entirely out of my control, which is why I'm spinning my wheels on it. I want it to be something that thousands, millions of people read, are really moved by. It reaches people who haven't gone through motherhood or medical crises, but see themselves in this. I want to be rich and famous. And you know why? I want reparations for our suffering. Now, here's part of the issue, one of the issues, many issues here. If I don't meet my expectations, that shatters a huge worldview that I hold
Mm.
about my entire life. So not just what I experienced or specific to this book or ambition, but it's that everything that I do must have meaning.
Oh,
And I've assigned a very specific definition to what meaning is. But if, let's say, this goes nowhere,
mhm.
like it's all for nothing, we just suffered, my poor son,
Mm.
my poor family, the medical debt, it was for nothing, which of course isn't true because I'm writing about lessons I learned.
Yeah.
Okay. But that also means everything that I do trying to turn obstacles into opportunity, like driver for me.
Yeah.
So it's again, it's not, this is why I love that word holistic, because it's not like all of these issues can be contained within one thing we're doing. It's
So, yeah.
obviously a much bigger issue here that I need to work on. I gotta go back to therapy. All right.
Listen, I'm a work in progress. Okay, so is learning not enough for you? And tell me why.
Learning is not enough for me. No, those learnings have to help other people, which
Okay.
is why I got chills, by the way, not to deflect, but I'm going to deflect for a quick second.
Yeah.
When you had this awareness during your meditation, where you said, my grandfather came to me and said, teach from you.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's my whole thing, is like everything that I go through that I learn, if I can't pass it along to somebody else and it stays stuck within me, that feels like I've wasted my life.
Okay.
This is so heavy.
No, this is perfect. Okay, perfect. So you can learn something and pass it on to other people without hitting the bestseller list. No?
Yes.
Okay.
But because the suffering was what I realized last night, when I was like,
Mhm.
the reason I'm putting so much pressure on this project was because I want the rewards to be commensurate with the suffering. So the magnitude of the suffering was so great that I want the magnitude of what I get from this, which is the satisfaction of helping so many people. So I want money, I want fame. Like this is my ego talking, and I'm being honest with you all. Like it it was just so horrific. If
Yeah.
I don't get all the goods, then it feels, again, binary. It feels like, then what the fuck was it for? So
Yeah.
that I could feel closer to my family for about 10 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, so what does commensurate with the suffering look like? Like, give me the list. Like, how much money do you need to make? What does fame look like? What is commensurate with the suffering? The suffering was big. So what is commensurate?
Yeah, yeah. I want speaking tour. I want to be like a household name. Let's just go for that. Let's talk about ambition. I want Oprah.
Okay.
Oprah goes, we got to get clear on this on my show.
Do you think being on Oprah is really going to fill this is like is going to
Yeah.
fill the hole in your heart?
No, so it will, again, 10 minutes, it will. And then this brings me to another question I was excited to ask you is no, because the goalpost will change.
Exactly. The
Right.
goalpost will change. I want reparations for our suffering. Tell me about your suffering. This is getting very personal. I hope you're okay with it.
I'm okay with that. I hope people here aren't like, I didn't sign up for this. Guys, we're going to get through everything.
Yeah.
We talk fast here. I mean, it did two major things. It ruined all of our finances. It ruined my marriage. Not ruined upon, hopefully not upon, far
Yeah,
beyond
irreparably.
repair, but
Yeah.
it decimated our business, our money, and our marriage. But on the other side, there were unbelievable gifts that came from it
Yeah.
that had nothing to do with the reparations.
Yeah.
That's why I feel excited to tell this story, because of the gifts. I'm
Yeah.
not just telling a story of suffering, but what I got out of it. So you could say, all right, what you got out of it, do you need the reparations to fix it? But yeah.
Who are you mad at because of this?
The universe.
Yeah. That's what
Yeah.
it sounds like. It sounds like you're mad at God. And I have felt this, like, when I had my health crisis, I was so mad at God. I was like, I have been through so many hard things. Like, why is there another hard thing?
Yeah. Yeah. That's how I feel. Yeah.
And one thing that I've noticed about you and learned from you a little bit is that you're welcoming God a little bit into the conversation recently, right? You had,
For sure.
and you had been agnostic before, right?
For sure.
I think that this is actually like a conversation of faith, right? Of what do you believe that God has put you through, universe, however you want to language it, right? Like, we all get to decide. Do you believe that God has put you through these hard things because he wants you to suffer, or they want you to suffer, or because there's something bigger here? I think that there's actually huge power in your anger with God and the universe. I think reconciling your anger is the only thing that is going to give you the reparations.
And so this is the rub. I'm writing about all this. The reconciliation is the ambition. That's the problem. God's saying, I'm giving you all of these things to suffer through so that you can learn and teach the people.
Yeah.
So
But
this is why I'm hoping everyone's seeing how my personal situation is relevant in some way to yours and what you've written about, in that, like, it's taking something that's ambitious, that's beautiful, but then there's this dark side, right? This
yeah.
pressure of now I've got to use it. And when it all requires work, but it's my zone of genius too. That's the
And
damn problem.
And I think also the more you are like softening into this conversation with faith and God and universe and the higher power, the less you are going to feel the pressure of this ambition. I'm going to give you an example from my own life.
Yeah.
I have a big rejection wound from my mother. And what I realized in writing the book is that one, my rejection wound is still big, even after 15 years of therapy and EMDR, nervous system work, and all the things. But writing the book is a spiritual assignment to heal my rejection wound, because you have to get up 100 times and get knocked down 99. And you know what happened in the process of writing the book? So I write about a little tiny bit, like 4 pages, about my family, because I think identity, family, and ambition, it's all part of the same story. And so I gave my mom an advanced reader copy, and guess what? She was really triggered by the book. She did not have a good response, and I had to chase her for the truth. I had to chase her for the truth. And it was like, and it was really painful. I was like, oh, this is really invalidating. And like, I'm taking care of her feelings, and now it's about her. And then I had this realization afterwards, and I was like, oh my God, the most amazing and freeing thing just happened to me. My mom is my original rejection wound. I was writing the book to heal the rejection wound, and I didn't even know. And what is more healing than being rejected by the original rejection wound? So you can put yourself out there in all the ways and nothing else hurts, because you just had this experience.
Yeah.
And I think that there's going to be such a profound healing for you in your softening into the conversations more with the universe and God. And then what happens on the outside, it'll matter. It matters. The book needs to get into people's hands. It matters. I'm not saying it doesn't. It'll just feel like way less pressure.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I think, a lot of this is why I'm really particularly excited about talking about rethinking ambition, because I think there's almost, at least I perceive it to have, a contradiction inherent in it. When
Yeah.
I think ambition, I think work, right? Like big vision, you want change, you got to work for it, not to the point of burnout necessarily, but you are pushing. Okay. That seems at odds with a softening or a letting, or as Mel Robbins says, let them. So how can we hold those contradictions in the same hand, right? Of drive and then release, drive and release.
Yeah, I actually don't think ambition is about pushing. I think it's about unfolding, right? This is a really flippant example, but it's the one that came to my mind. It's, if I'm willing my hair to grow, that energy is very different than my hair is just growing, because that's what it naturally does, right? So we are designed to unfold. We're designed to keep moving to the next level. The difference is the gripping, right? Like when it's like, I'm pushing for my growth, it's coming from a place of pain. And when we reconcile the pain, the unfolding is just natural.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it's almost, if I'm a visual person. So let's say this is our life, this pen is my life, and it's not whether or not I'm holding on to it, it's just how tight.
Okay. So let's use the example of grass, right? If we can visualize grass, right? Grass is, the inner and outer environment is nurtured by the sun, the soil, the water, right? So because it's being nurtured, it's just going to unfold. It's just going to grow. It's just going to reach towards the sun. We're the same. Our ambition is the same, right? If you nurture yourself in this conversation that you're having, right, the story is just going to keep unfolding. The way that you're writing the book is going to keep unfolding. So it's actually the energy behind it. It's the intention behind it, right? The make life happen, which is old me and what caused my burnout, versus I'm allowing this to unfold from my place of truth, because I know this is the next place that I'm meant to go. This is where the warmth is leading me. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I think another way of putting nurture yourself is environment. Is like instead of looking at how you can change, it might be, let's look at how we can change the environment to make it easier for you then to naturally unfold. I'll give a quick example, and I'd love if people in the chat want to jump in with your own questions, or if we're getting too off track, you can tell me to rein it back in. But one thing I noticed, at least with my book, when I wasn't writing and I was beating myself up for not writing, I found a writing partner, a woman whose son also has congenital heart. Sadly, he passed away, but her son had congenital heart defects, and she's also a writer. And we meet every morning at 5 a.m. and do Zooms, and I'm having fun now, right? And I have a friendship now.
Yeah.
And it's almost like writing is we just happen to write.
Yeah.
It's not the main event anymore. So I think that's a good example of shifting the environment or nurturing yourself and then letting it unfold.
I think
Do
that's
you
beautiful. Because you could be like, I have to write 500 words today.
Yeah.
And that's the push energy that we're trying to shift away from versus I'm having a great time. And then these words naturally float onto the page.
Yes, yeah, and I never put deadlines on the writing because, like, oh, yes, totally. But it's the showing. There is a consistency to it, though, right? It isn't we just show up when we feel like it. So I guess what role does discipline play? Or I don't even know if that's a word you like, but like discipline, how that fits in with this new definition of ambition.
Yes. Okay. I love that you said, is that a word that you like? Because it is one I do not.
Uh-huh.
So, but there's a version of this that I like. So discipline means to obey a set of codes or behaviors. And the reason that I don't like this word is because those codes and behaviors that we are meant to obey don't work for all people and all identities. I think it's really, as people with uteruses, right? Our hormones are different every single day. So how we produce and perform every day is really different. So the idea of discipline and performing exactly the same way every day feels in violation of my true nature. But I love the word devotion. Devotion means to be dedicated to a divine purpose. And it comes from the Latin root devovere, which actually has the same root word as discipline.
Mhm.
And it means to be like, to be a student, to be a perpetual student, and to be a student dedicated to a divine purpose. I think is such a beautiful place to come from versus must make it happen, must be disciplined, must violate my true nature to allow this thing to happen. And guess what? The outcome is generally a lot more beautiful.
Let's talk about true nature for a second, because as I'm looking at the event invitation, I did want to talk about the 3 E's of inner genius, and I have a feeling that's not I have a feeling I know that's related to quote true nature. So, talk to me a little bit about what those E's are.
Yeah. So this is a version of Gay Hendricks' work. So I believe that we operate in 3 zones:
Okay.
our exceptional, our excellent, and our eh. So I always like to start with the eh is the space that we're average at. It's the space that like our brain just wasn't designed for. And there's no shame or judgment. We all have spaces like that. And then there's the excellent zone where we're practiced, polished, and really proficient, where we've worked really hard to cultivate skills there. We're really good at it. But I think it's like my former career in marketing, right? I was really good, but I had to work really hard to be really good. So I burned out. And then there's our exceptional zone, which is our zone of genius, which is the space that we are off the charts amazing. And it's a form of privilege to only work in our exceptional abilities. But if we start with just those 10 minutes a day, over time, we really can expand to spend much more time in there. And then what we contribute is like our highest yield contribution. Like Claire, what you're doing, you're so in your zone of genius. This is such a high yield contribution versus if you were laboring in a space that was like the zone that you're average at.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. By the way, if anyone has questions, if you have a specific situation you're in as it relates to any of my questions, feel free to jump in. Stacy just wrote, I'm loving this discipline versus devotion. I've been trying to try ways to convey the importance of devotion to participants in my programs. Been experiencing a lot of people flaking out lately. Do you have any guidance, I guess, for Stacy? Maybe first for like how she can let go of expectations of others too and be okay with the flaking, but also if there's ways to, I guess the answer is by the book, but like how do we help other people see a different way of being like this?
Yeah, I love this. There's a lot in here, right? I'm like, should we get Stacy in here and do some live coaching? But I think what's really important is understanding why people aren't doing the thing that they say that they're going to do, right? Because generally speaking, when really smart people aren't doing a thing, there's either some mindset in the way or there's some nervous system in the way. So are there some stories there about, are we afraid of failure? So we're just not throwing our hat in the ring. We're not even trying. Are we self-sabotaging because our nervous system doesn't feel safe in our next level of growth? So really understanding why people aren't doing the thing that they say that they're going to do is really important. And then also, can we growth mindset this for ourselves? Did we not lay out expectations in a certain way? Do we need to redesign the program? Sometimes when I'm doing group stuff, if I feel like people aren't having enough of a transformation, I'm like, okay, next go round, I feel like we need one-on-one because I need to be able to go deeper. So I think it's a combination of what's happening for the individual participants at a mindset and nervous system level, and then growth mindset. Is there anything I need to shift for the next time we do this?
Love that. I love that. Let's talk about 4 strategies for workplace contentment. Okay. You mentioned living above the resentment line. So what does that mean?
I love this question because I think it goes back to what you're saying of like the tension that we feel in ambition. I was doing a podcast the other day and this woman was like, my brain is short circuiting of like, how can we have contentment inside of ambition? So contentment basically in Eastern traditions translates into the knowledge of enough, right? This inner stability that regardless of what is happening externally, we have the knowledge that we are enough and that everything is okay as is. It doesn't mean that we don't want more. Of course we want more, right? Of course we want to keep unfolding, but it doesn't mean that we're in a state of despair or life is broken if this is it, right? And so bringing that contentment to our work takes the pressure off, right? Takes the expectation off in a way that I think is really generous. And of course, you can always, I want people to have goals. I want people to be ambitious. And the difference here is we're not like hurting ourselves, wringing the productivity out of ourselves to get to the goal. So the resentment line is exactly what it sounds like. It is the line, if we live below it, which we will feel resentful. And it shows up for a lot of my clients in terms of overworking and undercharging, not being properly supported, not asking for help, not having appropriate boundaries. And when all of those things happen, we feel really resentful. And so I think resentment is a really great indicator for us if we're out of alignment, if we're maybe living from a place of pain, if we haven't cultivated enough contentment inside of our work and our lives.
I really like that. That I wrote down the word guardrails because I really want to know what are signs that we can train ourselves as best as possible so that we aren't dealing with this when we're already burnt out or resentful.
Yeah. So some guardrails or some indicators. Sometimes we'll start to feel a little bit of distance from our work, like things that we were really excited about. Now, all of a sudden, they have a little bit less meaning. We almost feel like we're feeling distant from them. They don't matter as much to us.
Yeah.
We might also start to feel a little bit, maybe we're not quite at resentment yet, but we're not as excited about our coworkers, our clients, or our constituents. The minute you're like, oh God, I've got to get on the call with this person again, there's a little something there for you. And we also might start to be feeling physical symptoms too. We might notice tension in our chest. We might start to be getting headaches because we're not being resourced appropriately. So there can be physical symptoms in there too. But generally, just kind of distancing from things that we used to love and people that we used to love because we're not resourced enough.
Yeah. What about if you have this realization, and I'm not sure if there's anybody here who's gone through this, but I would say you have in the sense of a pivot, right? Where you defined ambition in a certain way, had a worldview, you had behaviors associated with that worldview, and then you said, no more. My gosh, that requires a lot of courage, right? So if you're standing on the precipice of major change like that, what's your counsel for those folks feeling like they're jumping into the unknown here?
Yeah. Brittany Packnett Cunningham has this beautiful TED talk on cultivating confidence. And she says, confidence is born in community. It's the safest place to try it on. It needs permission to exist, and curiosity affirms it. And so it requires so much confidence to choose something new. And so we often can't go from 0 to 100 overnight. So I often invite my clients to figure out what is the minimal viable way that we could try this thing on for size and see if it's right for us before we go completely in this direction. And community is the safest place for us to do that. So I'll give you an example. I worked in marketing and brand management, and then I did this coach's training program. And then I was like, okay, I cannot leave my marketing salary that pays all my bills and become a coach. Like, what, I'm going to charge like $100 an hour? Like, how is that going to get me where I need to go? And so I started by coaching the tech team in the company that I worked for. And they would just come into my office at 8 a.m. before work started, and we'd have our little coaching sessions. And I got my first set of testimonials. And I was like, turns out I'm pretty good at this coaching thing. So that was my community. And that was the safest place for me to try it on. And it gave me permission for my confidence to exist. And then I just kept using curiosity to affirm it. And so that's what I would invite people to do.
If you feel comfortable sharing, what do you still struggle with today in relation to, just to underscore that the work is ongoing and doesn't make anyone feel worse, that makes them feel less alone in that. But like, how does your reconciliation of this new way of being pop up for things are going well, you're in the new zone, and then all of a sudden you're like, ah, damn, still there, core wound?
Yeah, literally this book process. I wrote the book on changing our relationship to ambition and doing it in a purposeful, not painful way. And I have felt my wound every step of the way of this process. And I think the trick here is to not come from a place of shame, because sometimes we can shame ourselves and be like, Amina, you're a coach. You should know better. What are you doing? Why are you back in this place? No, this is a next level of becoming. These are new behaviors for my nervous system. I've never done this before. Of course, we're going to get tapped on the shoulder. So every time you're doing something new, I really want you to be kind to yourself, because your nervous system, this is novel. So of course it's going to throw up the red flag and be like, hey, we're unsafe. And see if you can love yourself through those parts. Literally, last week, I was doing something new around the book, and I noticed my heart rate spike. And I was like, this is uncomfortable. I look at my watch, my heart rate is at 140 and it won't come down for 10, 15 minutes. And I was like, I think people might call this a panic attack. And I was really struggling with it. And then I was using my tools and like I was eventually able to regulate. But I think this is really important to hear because every next level of becoming is going to require something different for us. And so the same wounds may tap us on the shoulders. It doesn't mean we are broken, doesn't mean we are a problem. Use the tools that you have and be kind to yourself.
Yeah. Rachel Cargill, I'm just reading out of the chat here. Rachel Cargill writes about you have the option to love yourself to new levels, which helped me realize who I already am is valuable and while still having and pursuing goals to reach other ambitions. Yeah, again, it's so much of this is contradictions. Where does rest come in? Can you rest?
Yes,
great. Thank you, Mila. I appreciate you.
Yes. So there is a diagram in the book. Let me see if I can actually find it and show it to you all. So basically, as a culture, we are taught that ambition means more for more's sake all the time. And I think that's what we have to reframe, right? I actually think that ambition, okay, here it is. I don't know how to turn my blur off. Let me see.
Or you could tell me what page.
Hold on. It is it's Roman numeral 24 and 25.
I don't know what Roman numeral.
Okay, hold on. I think I can turn my blur off. There we go. Is it off? Yeah, off. Not really. This is hilarious. Oopsie. Okay, I'm gonna figure this out. Oops, no, I just put myself in an Arabian cafe.
Incredible. That is rest right there. Yeah. You
Okay.
came on an actual vacation.
So I'll explain it to you. So we live in a society and a culture that believes that ambition is more for more sake all the time. It's this line that is always going upward. I actually think it's more like a perennial flower. I don't know if you can see yes, there we go. So it goes in cycles. So with perennial flowers, seeds are dropped into the ground, the seedling of a desire for growth, ambition. And we nurture the inner and outer environment, and therefore the flower, the plant grows, right? And then it has this momentary peak in the sun, this flowering where the petals are out, and it's so beautiful. And then the seasons change, and then the petals fall off, and then it goes back underground, and it rests there, and it takes care of the inner and outer environment again until it's ready to come back up to the surface. And so I actually think that ambition, not about more for more sake all the time, it's about cultivation, pacing, rest, recovery, and growth. I'm glad you asked that question. Thank you.
Yeah. And that paying very close attention to I think everything comes in a cycle, especially if you get your period, like literally there is a cycle happening. And I have noticed and I don't know if you want to talk about any kind of like self-reflection prompts that can be helpful for staying in touch with yourself. But I noticed there is I'll have a high. I also have bipolar type 2. So there's that added to the mix, but I'll go on like a mini mania managed by medication. And then what goes up must come down. And then there's a down period with certain things I feel. And then there's a bit of an up and then there's a more of an up. And I become more objective. So when I'm going through something, I'm like, I don't go, oh, this is my life now.
Yeah.
I just take the edge off of it all because I can see it at a bit of a distance since I'm now aware of the larger cycles that happen.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's something that I've come to, like I just hit my 4th decade. And the thing that I'm struck by most is like now having worked for 20 years is that everything is a season. And that is so wonderful, right? All the wonderful things are a season. All the challenging things are a season. And we need to remember that everything is just a season. And so if things are feeling particularly hard right now, ask yourself, could this just be a season? When was another season where things were really hard and then the season shifted? And then, I was in a much better place? Or how can I leverage my zone of genius in this tough season to feel a little bit more in right relationship?
I love that. I didn't prep you with this question, or prep you with any question, but favorite client stories that you feel comfortable sharing, just like transformation, give us hope. Somebody who maybe came to you, as you said, bedraggled, love that word, burnt out and bedraggled, and then was able to find another way.
Yeah, I love this question. I don't know why, but this person popped into my head. I've coached everybody from VC-backed founders to Olympians to Fortune 100 leaders. But the person that comes to mind is a meditation teacher. And this meditation teacher came from a lineage where they weren't able to touch money. And so when they finally shifted out of that lineage and they started charging dollars for their work, they still had a really funky relationship with it because they had lived so long being like, money's taboo, I'm not allowed to touch it. And so they were really bedraggled and so worn out because they were working so hard, working round the clock. And we did a lot of the work in this book. Actually, this is the person that introduced me to my book agent after doing this work. And we did a lot of work in this book. And then over the course of a year, they not only tripled their income, they had then 6 figures in savings and were able to buy their first house. And then their financial planner was like, what happened? And they're like, I worked with Amina. And then their financial planner became my client. And I just think that's such an interesting story, right? Because going from the place of the beliefs, right? And where the nervous system was around that, not being able to grow and touch money and all those things, then getting to the place where they felt so in right relationship with it and were able to do it in a way that felt good for them. And then the world took notice.
And that, again, things came out of it for you that you couldn't have even planned.
Totally.
Do you mind sharing that story about the money, your own money? I know it's a little bit off topic of the ambition, but when you realized you couldn't get above a certain amount of money and then why, I still think about that story. It's so good.
So we were on a panel together, right? I think I told this story.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Early in my business, so my first goal was I just want to replace my marketing salary. So after a year, one by one client, I was able to do that. And I did that because I was partially still doing marketing consulting and then built enough of my practice that I was able to let that go and then replace my salary. And then the next year I was like, okay, cool. Now I want to make $250,000. So I made $250,000. Then the next year I was like, okay, I want to get to 400. And I was stuck at $250,000 for 2-3 years. And I was like, what is going on? I don't understand. And so I tried all the things, right? I did my own work. I did the mindset work. I was talking to a therapist. I was switching up my programs, all the things. And then finally I decided, I don't know why I decided this, but I did. I was like, I'm going to talk to a hypnotherapist. So I spoke to a hypnotherapist and I did this hypnotherapy session. And I came across this memory that I hadn't recalled in a very long time. If anything, it was repressed. And it was learning how much my dad made when I was in elementary school, and he earned around that. Now, to complicate this, my dad is a diagnosed narcissist. And so basically, I had created this story in my head. If I out earn my dad, he's going to hurt me. And my dad has never physically hurt me, but the energy is he has to be the biggest, shiniest person in the room. So I had created this ceiling for myself, not consciously. And I was going to stay there because I was so afraid of what would happen on the other side. But as soon as I saw that, I was like, that's a pile of crap. I need to work through that. And obviously I used a lot of tools and I changed up my strategy. And so I don't want to present this as a silver bullet, but it was this big illuminating moment that then helped me see where I was limiting myself. And after that year, I was able to hit my 400K goal and move on from there.
My gosh, unbelievable. That story is so good. By the way, diagnosed narcissist. My father's an undiagnosed narcissist. So not to get into parents for a bit, did he literally get that diagnosis?
Yeah, it was really interesting. We had a family therapist and the family therapist offered the diagnosis. And listen, like labels can be a form of liberation or limitation. All I know is that my dad took up a lot of space and it didn't feel safe for the rest of us.
Your bank account's looking quite nice. And maybe that'll be the next conversation that I would love to learn from you. Anything else that you want to share? Please, let's drop the link. How can people buy the book, connect with you, follow you, learn from you? And if anyone else has like a quick question, I welcome you. I super appreciate you all for staying the entire time. That was really awesome.
Yes. Thank you all so much for being here, for listening. You can get the book anywhere you buy books. Your favorite local bookstore is fantastic. Here's a link to the Penguin website, and you can learn more about me on my website, aminaaltai.com. I also have a podcast. Claire, have you been on the podcast?
Yeah, it hasn't come out. It hasn't come out yet.
Yeah. So listen to Claire's episode. Yeah, but it's been so wonderful to be with you all. Thank you so much. Advice?
Yeah.
Who am I to ask for more when I already have? Yeah, that's a really big one, right? I see this a lot with my clients because they're high achieving. And
by the way, let me just read that question fully out loud for this podcast, since I'm going to be releasing this as a podcast as well. So the question came from the chat, and it's the advice on how to get past, quote, who am I to ask for more when I already have a lot more than many people?
Yeah, I love this question. And Claire, I want to hear your perspective too. But here's what I know and believe and have seen. The more women and other historically excluded people have money, the more good that we do in the world. When women have more money, for example, we reinvest 90% in our families and communities. When men have more money, they reinvest 40%. So that's one simple data point that shows you when we have more, we do more good. And just because we have more than others doesn't mean that we don't deserve more. If we can use our more to help other people have more, that's a really great thing, right? It's not like you're a billionaire that needs another billion and you're hoarding this money. You're using it to be resourced so you can resource other people. And so I think coming from that place and reconnecting the money to our why and what we're going to do with it is a really generative place.
And also, this speaks to an issue we talked earlier about with like binary, right? So we oftentimes are like, it's either this or that, or we are this or that, success or failure. It's rarely ever that. There's always multitudes. And so this binary thinking of more for me means less for you, or more for me means less for others. Why does it have to be that way? Isn't there an and more for me and more for others? More for me and also less for others, and has nothing to do with me because it has to do with capitalism and that's not my fault. Let's not suffer. What use does our suffering do? How does it help us or others to suffer or to have less? So even if you end up not donating your money or doing it, you buy yourself shoes and you enjoy it, guess what? That positive energy now, you're coming to work and life going, I'm loving my shoes. Hey, that's good. That's good vibes for everyone else. So so I just catch is this binary thinking, and that's always the first step to finding another way to see it. Oh, the question, do you talk about L in your book?
Elle?
Who's L? Oh, and then emotional intelligence. Oh, EI. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think the whole book is pretty much about emotional intelligence and where our ambition is coming from. So much of it requires us to be in tune with what's happening in our minds, in our bodies, in our hearts. And yeah, it's not an explicit chapter. It's not named that, but I think it's woven throughout the conversation.
For sure. Yeah. And I appreciate the shout out, Claire. I remember Claire saying we owe our future clients our ambitions now. Yeah. I mean, that there's people who are looking for you. They're looking for your help. They're looking for your voice, just knowing they're not alone in whatever they're going through. And so we must put ourselves out there, if not for ourselves, for others. However, and this is the caveat, is Amina's book, right? It's how you do it. So that, because I call myself a recovering girl boss, where I really, so much ambition, drive, because I want to solve the wage gap and I'm angry about it, and all of these sort of noble reasons, but they were too angry. Like, I don't want to operate from anger or fear or at the expense of myself, right? But again, I think you can do it and have it all if it's done with ease. So still figuring that out. And thank you all for coming to my therapy session or my coaching session. I wasn't expecting that, but I super benefited from it. Seems most of y'all stayed, so I think you did too. Yep, got a few core wounds to deal with. And hopefully that doesn't make anyone feel like, oh my God, there's so much work. It's like, no, it just means you've unearthed another layer of self-understanding, and how beautiful. Actually, I did want to just pin you to responding to my question I asked earlier, because I don't think we ended up going down that road. Self-reflection prompts. So since everything here is tethered to knowing yourself at your deepest level, that is an ongoing process. What are some questions we can ask ourselves to get started with on maybe a consistent basis to deepen our relationship with those parts of ourselves?
I think particularly in this conversation, like leaving today and asking yourself, how do I define success for whatever projects I'm working on, whatever relationship I'm in? How am I defining success? Is that definition of success supporting me? What is my why? What's the why behind my striving or my desire for more? And then if you haven't we haven't got the book yet, right? But if you can remember some of those core wounds, are my core wounds driving any of that? And then if you're starting to notice that, just moment to moment, where can you notice that in your week and in your day, and then choose another way? I think it's a lot will be revealed from that alone.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. Appreciate you all. Check out AminaAltai.com, but all the links will be in the recording and the podcast that I send out. Super appreciate you. Be in touch and go get paid.